A Stranger at Home, Chapter 1. The boat crunched to a stop against the shore. My fingers gripped into the sides of it as I propelled my body over the edge. "No!" I heard my friend Agnes called with a restrained cry. The shore was packed with people, though Tuktoyaktuk was very small. I pushed through the crowd, my canvas shoes rolling on the tiny pebbles as I searched for my family. It had been so long since I'd seen them. I heard a voice I recognized. It was my mother's. She was speaking to my siblings. I turned and followed it, making my way through the throng to where she stood, with my 2-year-old brother, Ernest, tied to her back, and my sisters, Mabel and Elizabeth, still looking up at the boat for me to disembark. I wondered why my father had not run to meet me the minute my feet hit the shore, but he was not with them. I stood proudly before my mother and my siblings and waited for them to rush towards me. My mother gave me a strange look, as if to question why I was standing before her. I smiled, but she crossed her arms and shook her head. "Not my girl, not my girl," she shouted up to the dark-cloaked brothers in the only English I'd ever heard her speak. I turned around to look at them, where they stood, perched like birds of prey at the rail of the Immaculata. Their beardy eyes studied me. If my mother didn't recognize me, I was certain that at any moment they would pounce on me and carry me back to their outsider's nest upon the Mackenzie Delta. I could not understand how this could happen. After days of being cramped aboard the small Roman Catholic boat, going ashore to stretch out our legs only when we stopped to drop my classmates at various Arctic settlements, this could not be my welcome. I had seen many mothers cry and several fathers turn their heads to hide their own tears as they welcomed back their children. After being gone for 2 years myself, I had all but lost hope that this day would come for me. But as each child left the boat on our way farther and farther north, my optimism grew. It grew until we reached the mouth of the Mackenzie River, and then the hope inside me erupted. The boat could barely contain the overwhelming anticipation I shared with my classmates. We had all waited for so long to be reunited with our parents in Tuktoyaktuk. Only my friend Agnes did not seem to be excited. When the shore came into view, its long, thin peninsula stretching out to meet us, I felt so happy. I was sure I could walk on water like Jesus had in the nun stories. Not even Agnes's reluctance or brother's glares were enough to suppress the loud cheers that arose from the rest of us. The banks swelled with people, perhaps double the 100 or so who lived in Tuk most of the time. Like mine, other families had come from afar to collect their children. The trapper's daughters saw her father in the crowd and hugged her older brother, crying for joy. They had been gone just as long as I had been, 2 years. A short summer this year before had left many of us locked in by the ocean ice, with our parents unable to make it all the way to Aklavik to pick us up, or to arrange to get us from Tuk. The 2 older Gwich'in girls jumped up and down and waved to their family on the shore. The one named Catherine, who had always tried to bully me at school, was the happiest, because she was now 13 and the outsiders could never make her go back to their school. I wasn't going back either. I was going to tell my parents how awful the school was, so they would never make me leave the safety of our home on the Banks Islands ever again. Now on the shore I looked from my unwelcoming mother up to where Agnes stood on the deck of the boat. She offered me a look of sympathy. Her own return had been painful the year before when she had gone home to Tuk for summer break. I turned again to my mother. Our eyes were level. I was no longer the little girl who had always looked up at her. I was desperate to find the glint of recognition. There was none. Her face was scrunched in the protest, disbelieving that I was her child. "Not my girl, not my girl," she called again to the brothers. I looked again to the boat behind me where the brothers stood, and I tensed, ready to run if they made a move to come down and haul me away from my family. I was going to bolt. I'd run to the end of the peninsula and jump into the ocean if I had to. I was not returning to the school with them. I was never going to let them take me back. It was their fault my mother did not know me. It was because of the brothers, the priests, and the nuns that she could no longer see who I was. They had cast an outsider spell on me with their endless chores and poor meals. They turned me from the plump, round-faced girl my mother knew into a skinny, gaunt creature, and they had cut my long black hair into short, choppy bob. They had spent 2 years masking all these changes. I was now 10 and several inches taller than I had been when my parents left me at the school up the river in Aklavik. I scanned the crowd for my father. He had come to save me. One of the brothers stepped onto the gangplank, and I leaned forward to run. But I was saved. My father emerged from the crowd and caught me in a tight embrace. The smoky smell of his parka wrapped around me. His strong hunter hands stroked my hair. "Oliman," he said to me, the special name I had not heard for 2 years. I whispered it to myself. Oliman. The Inuit name my grandfather had given me felt strange to my tongue. I could not remember the last time I had thought of the name, let alone heard it spoken lovingly in my ear. I had no longer felt worthy of it. It was like a beautiful dress that was far too big for me to wear. At the school, I was known only as Margaret. Margaret was like a tight, scratchy dress, too small like my school uniform. Not wanting my father to see that I was no longer Oliman, I buried my face in his chest. I felt a soft touch, lighter than my father's, on my back, a familiar warm touch that worked its way into my heart with a tenderness I had not known for a long, long time. The only one person had ever touched me so sweetly, my mother. She slid her hand from my back and around my chest, reaching for my buried face. Her fingers were smooth against my chin. I shrank from them, filled with shame at having all but forgotten how affectionate a touch could be, and cried until my tears turned my father's parka wet. My 8-year-old sister Elizabeth approached us first, while 7-year-old Mabel hung back. Then they joined us with a crushing hug, squeezing me in their embrace. Ernest reached out and touched my hair. All of those raven-eyed brothers together could not have pried me from my family. I was safe. By the time we separated, the brothers were pushing the Immaculata off the shore. They were moving on. Catherine and the other Gwich'in girls would soon be leaving too. The supply barge that had been in Aklavik when we left, and it would arrive here in Tuk any day. After that, Catherine would go with her people far to the south of Tuk, and I would never have to see her again. The trapper's daughter and her brother would also be going. As I watched their mother kiss them, I wondered how they felt about the school. Being outsiders, like the nuns and the priests, they had not found the school so hard, but I could tell by the way that they clung to their mothers that they had missed them, just as I had missed my own family. I caught Agnes's eyes, and she smiled at me, waving goodbye as she supported her mother as they walked up the bank and toward the tiny village of log cabins and the tent homes. I hoped I would get another chance to see her before the barge arrived, and I left with my family for a distant island. My mother assumed I would be hungry after the long journey down the delta, so she had brought along a package of my favorite things. I couldn't wait to eat my mother's food, but when we settled on the beach and she unwrapped the package, I nearly lost my stomach. I was sickened by the pungent smell of the whale blubber, muktuk. I remembered the salty smell of dried fish and the musky, gamey smell of meat and whipped caribou fat, which outsiders called Eskimo ice cream. But it was nothing like ice cream at all. I crinkled my nose shut. The food smelt even worse than the swampy cabbage and disgusting bland, mushy porridge and beans we had to eat at school. My mother scrunched her brow and frowned. I could see how hurt she was that I was not eager to eat the food she had prepared for me. As at school, we had been taught to pray before we ate, so I knew that God wanted me to drop to my knees and to give thanks for the food I was about to receive, even though I was not so thankful for it. My family's eyes were on me, though, and I could not find the courage to pray in front of them. I made note to give thanks later when I was alone, and took a cubed chunk of blubber, muktuk, between my fingers. It felt like the bottom of my canvas runners. Reluctantly, I put it in my mouth. It was rubbery and strange to chew, and the taste made a gag come into my throat. I swallowed it down. The fish, which I reminded myself was called pipsy, was salty, and the Eskimo ice cream was also so rich I wanted to stick my head in the bay to wash away the taste. It all sat in my gut, filling me with a heavy, greasy feeling. I was hungry, and I wanted to please my mother, but it was too much. It was all too much. The way my little brother studied me as if I was a strange species of fish that had washed ashore, and that the way my mother touched the ends of my hair, and she sobbed that the little girl had been turned into an outsider. I no longer belonged to my own family.